Okay, so we're going to be talking about the Taming of the Shrew, and whether we think it's a funny play or a cruel play, or something entirely different, maybe a mix of the two. So we've got Joe, Will, Alex, and me. And Joe, would you like to go first? What's your opinion?
Yeah, so I think that it's actually a cruel play. I think that a good example of extreme cruelty in the play, although it is quite prevalent throughout, is Kate's speech, Katerina. When we first meet her in the play, she's a very strong character. She is very independent, and in this speech, she has lost all of her values and speaks as a broken woman, because after Petruchio tortures her, she has no strength left, she has nothing like that, and she basically says that women should submit to men and that men are in control. And I think that's really cruel, because I think that the play talks about a lot of different important themes, and I think that feminism is a key theme of the play. And I think that really, it speaks volumes about the how women were viewed at the time, because they viewed as accessories and properties to men. And I think that this scene was really impactful and just shows that.
Yeah. So are you taking the speech 100% literally? Do you not think there's any kind of sarcasm or a different motive for her speaking in that way?
I do see how it could be that she's just going along with it because she has no other choice. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
She's just sort of going along with it just for now, but she doesn't really think that. But I just think that without reading, I don't know, I do feel like the speech is quite sincere overall. I think that the tone that she uses, and I think after the events, I just think that she has been broken.
Yeah, okay. Nice, okay. What do any of you other two think?
I think it could partly be a bit of a last laugh, the way she's almost convinced Petruchio that she submitted to him, whereas inside perhaps she hasn't.
Yeah, that's does anyone have any quotes maybe, or parts that would show why she's cruel or maybe not, whether it's cruel or not?
After the speech she does, in certain scripts of the play, she doesn't go off with Petruchio. Instead, she just stands there, and in others she goes off with him. So that could symbolise that she is embarrassing him on top of that maybe very misogynistic speech.
I think the one where she stands there is sort of her going against him, because if she followed him around, then I think that would be submitting. But I think her standing there after making that speech is quite an act of rebellion. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Small act of rebellion.
Yeah, just really doing what she can to hold on to who she was.
Mhm. Do you think she's overall? Do you think she's now happy with Petruchio, or content, or do you think she still wants to be, disobedient and whatever she used to be?
Well, I don't think she's happy with him. I mean, he's literally starving her and not providing her with basic human needs. So I think maybe she is playing along, but I think that maybe she's just given up at this point, and she just goes along with what he says to survive, really.
Right, yeah. Okay.
I think that end of the story's left ambiguous.
Yeah,
it could be that she's unhappy.
I think that
or it could be she's happy.
I think that was completely done on purpose, because I think the play is really up for interpretation, and I think that's a really why it's such an interesting read.
Yep. Okay. Will, what do you think about funny or cool?
I think, in general, it's completely up to interpretation. And in Act 4, Scene 1, arguably, it's the start of his supposed taming of Kate. Petruchio puts a big meal on the plate for Kate, and she's thinking, great, after a long walk, that's perfect. And he ends up throwing it back at the slave, or his I think a slave or servant in the play, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's
a servant. He ends up throwing it back, and Kate doesn't get to eat that night. Nor does she get to sleep, and you're thinking, all right, maybe this is funny, him throwing the food across the room. And we think at first, that's funny, it's a bit slapstick maybe. But then that night we hear Petruchio's soliloquy, and then we realise perhaps this is going to be more sinister. And we then realise this is his taming of the shrew, supposedly. This is how he's going to get her to submit to him. And that's perhaps the line, do we think, when it gets crossed from funny to cruel?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I think the line, when he says, to make her come and know her keeper's call, I think he's saying he wants her to act like a dog at that point, to try and make her so obedient that if he says, come here, she'll do it. And I think that might be what influences the speech. And maybe Petruchio isn't as shocked that she's saying that as he makes out to be.
Yeah.
Like when, he says about her being his hawk, doesn't he?
Yeah, there's a lot of, bird terminology and...
falconry.
Yeah.
There's a lot of falconry terminology.
And that's like, about birds always coming back to their owner and being obedient, and also, I think because birds come back for the food really, and it's symbolic that that he's starving her, and it's kind of there's a link there. So I think that's really well written, but it's also, as you said, it's a dark turn in his soliloquy.
Yeah, but again, falconers always say that the animals they have are never actually tamed. So maybe that's another link to later in the story.
Yeah.
So maybe the ending isn't as ambiguous. Maybe she's not tamed, but she stays with him because of a certain reward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's only Petruchio that thinks that's the way to, as he says, tame the shrew. No one really agrees with it. And especially when he challenges the audience in his soliloquy, saying anyone who knows better how to tame a shrew, he should speak now. But nobody would.
Yeah.
Everyone knows silently that that's not any way to go about it, but nobody would say anything because of the mood.
Yeah, and I think the way that he has so much power, and I think that he has not just power over Kate, but power over sort of the whole audience.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows that, I mean, you're not going to stand up and say that,
No, I mean, he's a big controlling force in almost every scene he's in.
And I think that sort of the whole of, manhood at that time, they controlled, just the way that women were viewed.
Yeah, like the patriarchy.
Yeah, a sort of big imposing, force on the way that people could live their lives.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, what does anyone think about doing a play such as this that's very focused on misogyny and sexism and attitudes towards women in an all-boys school? What do you think?
I think it's kind of important because, I think that it's hard because obviously attitudes towards women aren't something that men should get involved towards, things like the He for She campaign. But I don't think that it's an issue that always affects them directly. And I think that it's important that we learn about how it used to be and how it's changed and just things like that. I think it's just an important topic, really.
Yeah.
I don't think the views would get changed really in either school. I think everybody is in agreement these days about this kind of thing.
but in an all-boys school, it's perhaps easier to speak about it because there's no potential issues with what you could be saying about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. So, Alex, what do you think about the funny or cool? Going back to funny or cool, what do you think?
I think it's a bit of both, actually. In Act 3, all or most of the comic moments are pulled off due to the cruel behaviour. So, for example, the wedding scene, that includes some humour, but it's done by Petruchio to do further emotional damage after having arrived at the wedding late, wearing ridiculous clothes, causing Kate to break down, and then having her kind of think about what everyone will say. So I think he's exposing her insecurities to make her more emotionally vulnerable, so it's easier for him to kind of manipulate her. But most of the humour is slapstick, but that is what it's supposed to do, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any, like, other examples of the slapstick?
Yeah, so where he punches the priest and then kicks him while he's down to make sure that Kate and any of the relatives don't have a chance to object to them being married.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's kind of a bit of both then.
Yeah, he highly exaggerates him punching and then shouts, I think, a medieval swear, by God's wounds.
Yeah.
Which is referring to the nails in Jesus' palms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, in my opinion, I think it's again, that a bit of both, but it's also, it's not necessarily that there's a bit of funny parts and then there's some cruel parts. I think most of it is ambiguous and deliberately so.
Yeah. Yeah, most of it's in that kind of grey area.
Yeah, and
I think
so
there are
like
a few exceptions to the sort of grey area.
Yeah, some parts are just cruel and some parts are just funny.
Yeah, but I think that the fact that most of the play is a mix of the two sort of taints those, and that you sort of interpret.
Yeah, I think you could interpret the entire play as grey. Like there are some comic scenes which have maybe more dark and cruel undertones, but are mainly just funny on the surface, and some are cruel with funny undertones.
Yeah.
So you could interpret anything. You could interpret the whole play as one or the other, but I think it's more of a grey area.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Like I remember there's this in Act 4, Scene 3. It's the lines, "And gentle women wear such caps as these. When you are gentle, you shall have one too, and not till then." Petruchio referring to Kate wanting a cap that she's seen. But Petruchio won't let her have it, and I think this is, I see this as an invitation to Kate to do what he says, to be submissive and do, obey him, because then she'll get what she wants. She'll get the cap that she wants, and of course everything else that she wants, which is obviously what she does in the final act. Though whether that's just acting or truly, we don't know. But that same line could be interpreted as very sinister and manipulating, especially if it's said like in a quiet, threatening tone of voice, like, "and not till then," and it implies Petruchio's dominance, like a warning, as he's saying that he can and will deprive her of anything she wants until she behaves. I think it's just one example, and there's lots of the players undoubtedly malicious and cruel, with Petruchio denying Kate food and sleep, but obviously, as you said, there are undertones to all of it, I think.
I think the cap is a metaphor for like you said, once you're gentle, you can have everything, and I think that it links back to when he starts to starve her. Like, once you're gentle, you can have it back. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the cap is kind of like a metaphor for the reward, because he likens her to a disobedient hawk, and all hawks will come back for the reward of food.
Mm-hmm.
And so if he kind of half tames her, so that she knows that if she behaves and does what he wants, she'll get the cap and, like you said, everything else, just as long as she obeys, in public and things.
Yeah, certainly.
And also, one often accentuates the other, like cruelty in the induction. You can't deny it's perhaps slightly cruel to Christopher Sly. The trick that gets played on him at the start when he's told he's a lord, and he's deceived by it. It is slightly cruel, but that is what makes it funny, and I think that's true of many things in this play as well.
Yeah.
I don't know, the induction for me wasn't... I mean, for Sly, it was funny. It was funny to see him being horrible and then get this trick played on him. But for me, it's a lot crueler because of what the Lord makes Bartholomew do.
Which is?
Because the Lord makes Bartholomew dress up as a woman, and he is, again, exposing Bartholomew's possible insecurities that maybe he looks and sounds and acts like a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Lord exposes, Bartholomew to sexual assault from Sly, when Sly says, "Undress you and come now to bed."
Yeah, but I think that's the obviously you say exploiting her acts or looks like a woman. I think that's just because he's like young, so like his voice hasn't broken or whatever, and he's part of the joke. He's not actually, Sly's. They're not gonna let Sly sexually assault him, obviously.
But that's pretty funny as well when Sly says, "Oh,
Yeah.
we'll go to bed," and it's actually a man.
Yeah,
they've got no clue what to do.
Yeah.
They have to think on their feet in that situation. I mean, that's something that can be done in many different ways when it's put into production in a play. You can change how the actors react to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can definitely tell if the play is funny or cruel from what the production does. So I think everything can be changed. So any particularly cruel moments in a production can be made a lot funnier. Any funny moments can be made a lot crueler, a lot darker, things like that. So I think the ambiguity kind of dissolves when you're watching it as a play and not just reading it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's the production's choice, really.
Yeah, and finally, did you guys enjoy reading it? Did you like the play, like what it is?
I thought that it was quite interesting to study because of the ambiguity and maybe the sort of difficult topics that it touches on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, now I enjoyed that too. Personally, I like it a lot more as a play. I don't really like reading plays, but it was actually quite interesting to read, so it kept me interested.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.